how do you explain the appeal of a particular type of car? Well, in this program we aim to set out and look at the most typically Gallic of manufacturers, Citroen. Later on we'll be joining the Citroen Car Club members at their annual rally in Worcester to actually have a look at the vehicles, but first perhaps a little history lesson might be appropriate. André Citroen was born in 1878 in Paris, the son of a Jewish diamond merchant. His education was to be at the École Polytechnique, France's premier technical institute. From there he moved on to the army, and after a spell as an engineering officer, founded a gear company. The main product was to be double helical, silent running gears. Citroen gears were used in the Olympic and Titanic liners in 1911. Already André had made contacts in the motor industry, contacts that were to develop later on. A second spell in the army in the First World War saw André in charge of a shell factory at Chevrons near Paris. With peacetime arriving, André was to turn the factory over to a different form of production. Instead of shells, it was to be cars, as André, inspired by Henry Ford, aimed to set up the first production line, mass-produced car assembly plant in Europe. The model was to be the Type A, introduced in 1919. It was ready for the road. A lot of cars at that point were still issued in virtual kit form. For the emblem of the car, André Citroen was to return to his earlier engineering success and those double helical gears. Well, indeed, here we are at Worcester now, where already the Citroen Car Club rally is gathering vehicles at an increasing pace. We've already seen some Maserati SMs come on site. There's a good range of Ds around, but the main star this year has got to be the 2CV, because 1990 marks the final year after 42 years of production of this particular model. Indeed, the month we're recording this is July, and the 2CV's production run comes to an end this very month. We're going to take a look at all the various types around the rally here this afternoon. We've got some lovely sideshows as well, including some fascinating bits of Citroen ephemera. Let's start by taking a look at that classic model, the 2CV. Represented here by one of the earlier models here at the rally today, the 2CV was a 1930s design. The prototype, built in 1937, had to be hidden, though, from the German forces of occupation while they went about designing their own people's car. In 1948, the 2CV came onto the market. Powered by an air-cooled 375cc flat-twin engine, later upgraded to 602cc's, the car has earned a marvellous following in the Citroen marque and a place in the affection of the general car-buying public. Over 6.5 million models built since 1948. As I mentioned before, production due to come to an end here in July 1990. The second most productive car in automobile history after the Volkswagen Beetle. This dolly coming out for the driving test represents the later stage of production in the 2CV story. It really reflects the change in ownership of Citroen. The merger with Peugeot into PSA created a new working environment for the Citroen company. New marketing attempts were made to, in a way, jazz up the image of the old stalwart 2CV. At first, the Charleston design was adopted with a new paint scheme on the vehicle, trying to recreate a kind of 1930s sporty feel. From that, it moved on to what was virtually a self-parody in a way, in the Beachcomber, with a sunroof with striped colours on there, harking back to the days, of course, when the 2CV itself had a deck chair as the seat in it. From that, a little bit more sanity was resumed with the dolly, and you see a fine example of it here going round on the test circuit. It's a little ironic now, really, as most 2CV lovers would say, that such a fuel-efficient green motor car should be killed off by Citroen at a time when world markets perhaps are just becoming ready for it. We have the Third World moving into car production. We have the communist countries, the former communist countries of Eastern Europe, also now looking at a way to rebuild their motor industry. An easy car to build, such as the 2CV, a very rugged basic car, would perhaps be an ideal opportunity for involvement in other markets. It's a little ironic in a way that the 2CV is being killed off at a time when it could well be just about coming into its own. Production ended in France a couple of years ago, and indeed the last production run has been undertaken in Portugal. As you can see from the descriptions on the side and the extended bonnet of that particular 2CV. This is a racing variant. Represents an interesting modification to the basic classic 2CV design. Once more showing the versatility of the 2CV design, the van version, introduced at the same time as the original model back in 1948, is known as the camionette. With the outline body shell of the 2CV being perceived as unsuitable for the British market, a specifically British version was marketed in 1959 and dubbed the Bijou. Given the glass fibre body structure to the car, it's basically a 2CV underneath. The production run lasted until 1964, and indeed this Bijou is the first one seen at a Citroen rally for some 4 years. Inside the Bijou it looks very much like a D, and indeed the car was dubbed the Baby DS. In 1923, Citroen set up a UK base at Slough in Berkshire. It wasn't just to be a distribution centre, it was also to be a manufacturing centre. And here I have a 1931 Slough-built car. It's a 6-cylinder C6F. It's got a fascinating history, a lovely example of an early Citroen pre-Traction Avant. Let's have a look at it now with its owner, Brian Barry. Well, Brian, obviously there's been a lot of work put into this. What condition was she in when you first got it?
Terrible condition. It had been in a scrapyard for, I would think, about 30 years. When I first saw it, it was just one mass of rust. But I was quite impressed. I could see the potential. So I purchased it. Eventually got it home on a transporter. But really, when I did look into it, I was a bit horrified when I saw what I bought. The rust that was in the vehicle was far in excess of what I actually saw at the scrapyard. And to crown it all, when I lifted the bonnet up, there was a big hole in the block where number one piston had shot right through the side. I think what happened in the winter, the pump must have frozen up, caved in the wall of number one cylinder. Hence, they'd started it, the rod broke, came out the side, and I would imagine that was why it ended up in a scrapyard.
How long ago was that? There must have been a few years' work on this.
That was in 1970, so I've had a vehicle for 10 years. I suppose 7 years I've been working on it, not continuous, you know, you can't do something like this continuous. You've got to work on it when your mind is geared up to the situation, and you've got to do it when you want to do it. I did have a period whereby after about 2 years I was so cheesed off with it because I could see no headway, and it just sat in the corner for 18 months and I didn't do anything on it.
What particular problems were there? Was there anything really significant that had to be done, or was it all round the car?
It was all round the car. The biggest thing was after it was stripped down and it was all sandblasted, I was minus 7 inches of the lower half of the car. So I was looking forward to having to make up 7 inches and more, especially around the back area where the water had settled. But at least 7 inches of the whole bottom of the car had to be remade.
Right, what about the actual design of it? It's a 6-cylinder. Now, this would have been one of the early 6-cylinders of Citroens.
I think it was basically the first 6-cylinder that Citroen ever got involved in. It's known as a 2.5 litre. It was built in England. But I think he got a lot of influence from America, and I think this could be why he went over to the big motor car. I mean, before the 6, it was all 4-cylinder stuff, and they were all relatively small vehicles. And I did read that he went to America in the early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and I think a lot of influence did come from America in his motor manufacturing of that period.
Well, many congratulations on the job you've done so far. It really is a credit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
1934 saw Citroen make their first real breakthrough into really advanced motoring with the introduction of the famous Traction Avant. Engineered by André Lefebvre and with bodywork designed by Flaminio Bertoni, it was a classic car of the mid-1930s that was to set the scene for cars a generation ahead. Features, of course, were the front-wheel drive, first application in European motoring, combined with hydraulic brakes, torsion bar independent suspension on all 4 wheels, and monocoque bodywork. And of course, monocoque very much a later development in most other manufacturers' ranges. Later models of the Traction Avant featured rack and pinion steering, and really the whole car featured road holding and handling far ahead of the competition. The only problem with the Traction was that the development costs bankrupted the original André Citroen company. By December 1934, the company was on its last legs and was taken over by Michelin. Later, in 1935, André Citroen died. Well, here's a particularly notable Traction Avant. Very, very nice styling and interesting plate at the front there. Here's the owner of the Traction. He's just driven the car down from Yorkshire, Mick Popke.
Hello.
Mick, hello. How long have you had the car now?
Bought the car about 5 years ago through the Arch in London, famous place for all Traction owners. And since then, it's been, well, not daily transport, but we've used it quite well, covered over 20,000 miles.
So it's not just a museum piece, it is actually a functioning domestic car for you.
Yeah, well, quite the opposite from being a museum piece. A lot of the display people are quite shocked when I lift the bonnet and they see all the dirt and grease underneath it, necessary to keep it protected.
But you're talking about the car now as it would have been used, rather than...
Yes. It was owned actually by a doctor for 29 years. It's a 1950 model, and it was brought over to England in 1969. It was from his son that I actually bought it, or at least that's what they tell me in the Arch. But and since then, we've had one foray, as is shown by the plate on the front. We went over to Loreley. Sadly, couldn't make it over to Holland last September due to the arrival of little Nicholas, whose first outing it is today in it.
You won't often see a Traction with a baby seat in the front, will you?
No, the people at QuickFit had a bit of a shock when I went in and said, can you fit me a baby seat up in this? I eventually had to do it myself, but it was no problem.
What's it like to drive? Obviously a very, very forward-thinking car, literally with the front-wheel drive.
Yes, it is indeed. As you say, front-wheel drive, rack and pinion steering, independent suspension. When people see the car, they think it's from the 30s because of the styling. When I explain to them that a lot of the actual mechanical parts are the forerunners of the cars of today, they're quite surprised. It's amazing how cars haven't really come on much.
Well, Mick, shall we see the Traction in action, literally speaking? Of course, left-hand drive model nearly went over to the other side. And I'll leave you to it. Thanks very much. 20 years on after the breakthrough of the introduction of the Traction Avant, Citroen took another major leap forward in 1955 with the introduction of the Type D. Originally offered in the DS19 form with a 2-litre 11 CV engine, the debut at the Paris Salon in 1955 saw 12,000 orders placed on the first day. The major technological introduction, of course, was the famous hydropneumatic suspension system, offering high-pressure hydraulic power to the brakes, clutch and gear, also the suspension and height adjustment. Other feature was, of course, the aerodynamic body with detachable panels, also offering disc brakes and auto-load sensing. 2 years later saw the introduction of the ID variant with manual steering and manual gearbox. This particular example here is a 1962 ID19 manufactured in Britain at Slough. And here we have a 1971 DS20. Its owner is David Craft. David, it's in fine nick here.
Yes, I'm very proud of it. Quite a lot of work's gone into it. It came up from France last year, and I've had it about a year now. Most of the restoration was on the inside and the engine compartment, but basically she was rust-free, which pleased me about getting a DS that was rust-free.
Of course, one of the later models here.
Yes, it is, yes, with the closed door handles, and she's a typical DS, but actual DS20 I don't believe was marketed in this country. It was only marketed in France and on the continent.
It is indeed a left-hand drive version that we have here.
Yes, that's right, yes. It took a bit getting used to driving it, but I've got the hang of it now. The wife's not so pleased sitting on the other side. But yes, I find it's a joy to drive with the semi-automatic as well.
(1958) saw the introduction of the estate version of the D series, named the Safari, of course the name carried on later to the CX series. 1968 also saw a development in the D series when green hydroscopic mineral oil was used in the hydraulic fluid. Also there was a front-end modification to the range of D cars during the 1968 period. Incidentally, while we're on the Safari there, this of course is a body shell well known in its application for ambulance use. In 1970, the ailing Maserati company was purchased by Citroen. The product was the Type SM, a D derivative featuring the hydropneumatic suspension, but Citroen's first high-performance luxury car. Maserati engined, it featured a V6 170 horsepower 2670cc engine. Also a major feature of the SM was very power steering, where the power on the steering reduced in proportion to the speed. Also a self-centering system was an extra feature. The car type won the Moroccan Rally, but it was not a commercial success. Well, having spoken about the SM type, let's have a few words now with the owner of this particular car, David Osborne. David, how long have you had this one then?
Well, I imported it from France last November. I was very lucky to find it. I happened to be spending 2 weeks in France, and I was told of one advertised in Paris, telephoned that one, and after a long story ended up about 100 miles from Paris with this rather nice dark brown one. And that was quite a tale, because I went out during the weekend to test it, and of course it broke down, which caused no end of difficulty, but gave me a strong bargaining position.
How's it been since?
Well, thanks to Mr. Brodie, it's now in quite good shape.
What's it like to drive? I mentioned about the very power steering.
Oh, yes. Well, of course, the steering is just 2 turns lock to lock, and it definitely takes a period of experience to get sufficiently synchronized not to drive off the road. It's quite tricky.
They're quite collector's items now, not a long production run. It's a pity it really wasn't a commercial success.
Well, yes, it is. We believe that Citroen made about 13,500 of them altogether. I'm not sure how many found their way to England. I stand to be corrected, but maybe there are 300 or 400 known cars in England now. And yes, it's a wonderful car, as long as you do the necessary routine maintenance on the Maserati engine, which the last owner had not done, there's no problem.
1970 saw a new marque appear in the Citroen model range, the Type GS. Originally offered with a 1015cc flat-4 air-cooled engine, later upgraded to 1220cc, it featured hydropneumatic suspension and also disc brakes. The GS was Car of the Year in 1971. The latter part of the decade saw the introduction of the GSA. That was newly introduced in 1979, but later featured a 1300cc engine with 65 horsepower water-cooled engine. 1975 saw the Quai de Chaval factory that had produced so much of Citroen's production over the years replaced by a new factory at Aulnay. The first product was the 1975 CX, a transverse engine car that was to win the Car of the Year in 1975. Chief feature being the drag coefficient of just 0.36, a very, very sleek car. This particular model is the CX25 GTI Turbo. A particularly fine variant of the CX is this Prestige here, built for the executive market. Well, out in the arena now, we've got a Citroen CX Safari Reflex. And this is now the CX Estate model is now the only form of the CX available and being produced, with main saloon production having been phased out in favour of the XM. Well, here we have a particularly interesting Ami here, and the owner is Fabien Sabates, who's just about to come and join me. Not only a French car, French plates, also a French driver. Fabien, would you like to tell us something about your Ami?
Well, first, you know, the Ami 6 is a car, the Americans said it's the first car made after the crash, so it's ugly. They say it's ugly. I believe it's beautiful, but it's a matter of taste, you know. This car is from 68. It's a French car, of course. I mean, I'm French. I bought it in France from the grandson of the first owner. It has been stored 15 years in a garage, and I bought it some months ago. It's in absolutely original condition. As you can see, the painting, the roof, all the bumpers, tires, everything is from 68. And the motor, of course, is from 68. The car drove about 50,000 miles. It drives perfectly. And I came from France without problem at all, just fun, joy, because people look at me on the road and said, where is the flying saucer, you know? And I like it very much. It's a very charming car. It's not expensive, like people could believe. It's only very rare because most of those popular cars have been destroyed, completely destroyed. And today it's very difficult to find one. Also, those cars were not very well protected against rust, not at all, and most of them are completely rust today. Then this example is on a very, very good condition, and I think in about a year I will completely restore it. But first I'm trying to buy new parts for it, so I can change all the things inside could be changed, like brakes and maybe steering or I don't know what. Then next year I will come back here and with this car completely restored.
There is one major aspect to the design of this particular car. Now, it echoes in a way the actual start with André Citroën, where he was inspired by Henry Ford to introduce mass production of cars in Europe. There's a bit of Ford influence in the actual design of this Ami, isn't there? So Fabien, there's quite a distinctive design here at the rear of the car.
Yes, of course. You see this window here has been built specially by the designer, Mr. Flaminio Bertoni. Flaminio Bertoni is the designer of the Traction, the 2CV and the DS. This is his last work, and he died just some years after in 55, and this car has been a show in Paris in 61, the first car. And this particularity It's the same for the Ford Anglia, you see, is that when it's raining, you don't need any weepers, or you don't need to clean the window. It's always absolutely clean and perfect, and you can see very well. For the security, it's very good. And nobody will build a car like this today with a window oblique, but I think it's quite interesting. Of course, it's not absolutely beautiful. I believe it's beautiful, but it's very interesting as a technical system of body designing.
Fabien, as someone who's written extensively about the Marque Citroën, would you perhaps like to say your views on the current batch of models now with the Peugeot influence? Are they really Citroëns? Is the XM with the Peugeot engine really a Citroën?
That's a terrible question, because today it is still Citroën for the XM, for example, but the XM has a lot of Peugeot parts, and more Peugeot will eat Citroën until they make almost the same car with a different body, like maybe a Rover with Honda, and you know, Bentley and Rolls-Royce. You see what I mean? Or maybe the Metro MJ and okay. And I think it's a very pity, because there is a lot of Citroën enthusiasts, and also because Citroën has always been a technical researcher, and when you compare today the 605 Peugeot and the XM, well, there is no comparison. The XM is absolutely better, and I hope they will leave such a freedom to Citroën, but for a world market reason, I don't think they will, because Citroën doesn't sell so much cars to compare with Peugeot or with Renault, and if you want to be one of the big today, you have to concentrate on your power, your technical power and plans, and so to fight the Japanese, to fight the American, and this is a part of the new European system we are building now. But I'm a bit afraid, not for now, but for the next century, that Citroën will be a double mark, if you see what I mean. Like,
to say in English, badge engineering.
Yes. Well, I hope, and we all hope, of course, Citroën will be still free, but I'm a bit afraid.
Thank you very much, Fabien. A later derivative of the 2CV was the Diane, which entered production in 1967 and was in production for 16 years more. It was an early 5-door hatchback with an open roof, represented here by the Côte d'Azur. Introduced in 1968 was a 2CV derivative named the Mahari. Here's a pair of them in view. Mahari, by the way, is the name for a camel, and you can see why with the rugged all-terrain nature of these two 2CV derivatives. Soft tops were an option, but hard top was also an option, as we see on the Mahari on the right, the orange vehicle there. That's a 1983 version of the Mahari, featuring the thermoplastic body. There were two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive options. This is a two-wheel drive option. There was also a two-seater or four-seater option. We've seen the four-seater option. That's the particular two-seater version there. Well, here we have a typical representation of the 2CV in its main production run with the square headlights. Alongside, looking for all the world as if it had just finished delivering its load of bread to a baker's in the back streets of Paris. Were it not for the British plates, this H-Series van represents a type introduced in 1948 that, despite its ruggedness and perhaps the fact it's maybe the ugly duckling of the Citroen family, represents a major breakthrough in van design, because the low floor on it, the front-wheel drive nature of the vehicle, really laid the foundation for a lot of today's delivery vans and the basic transit and other derivatives of that version. The independent suspension was also a major development on the H-Series, which was introduced in 1948. The 2CV over the years has spawned many variants, and the most recent version was, of course, the Visa. Seven years on from the CX model and 6 years on from the merger with Peugeot that formed PSA, the BX model was introduced in 1982. It's most popular in its diesel form and has achieved a very useful mid-range position for Citroën in the 1980s. In 1986 there were design modifications, and here embodying those changes is a BX19 TRS. The BX is claimed by Citroen to have introduced many new motorists during the past decade to the delights of Citroen driving, particularly in the diesel version where Citroen have a particular market lead. Really makes you think though, if you go all the way back to the Traction Avant, all the way up, right up to the 80s, designed by Flaminio Bertoni. BX range has set some records along the way, with the BX19 RD was going on a test run when it covered 2,405 miles in 24 hours on test circuits, with speeds going up to 100 miles an hour. Won 21 Class E RAC records in that event, so the 19 RD setting the tone there for Citroen in the 80s. With the 2CV committed to history now, what of the future? Its replacement is the Type AX, introduced in 1986 and 1987 in the UK market. Falling into the modern-day category of the Super Mini, the Type AX features a revolutionary gearbox in the form of the MA, with fine machining, meaning that no matching has to be made of the moving parts in there. Everything can be fitted from a basic stock. It's also lubricated for life. The GT at the top range of the AX series can actually reach 112 miles per hour. There are 10 3-door and 5 5-door versions, and there's also a diesel option, quite remarkable in such a small car. And now the latest Citroen type, the XM, a replacement for the CX and introduced in 1989. The hydropneumatic suspension is still there, but the old long-stroke engine is being replaced by a Peugeot V6, which really leads some owners to question, is this car really a Citroen?
Any small children who like some balloons, there are 3 balloons at the bus. 3 taxis at the bus. Come and get them. It's a what? 7896, converted to a format Citroen 4, which means 2 cylinders, 2 seats and 4 wheels. Later on, see there's other moments this will help you.
No car rally would be complete without the sales area. It's a chance for Citroen owners to pick up maybe on some spare parts, some literature about their favourite cars, maybe even pick up a souvenir of the 2CV. How about a little metal badge? Or maybe even a fluffy one. Anyone for tea?
Here's an empty one. Come on, Pam. There's one there. Yeah, come on.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that array of Citroens. Going back to our original question, how do you define the appeal of a Citroen? Perhaps you have to look at the philosophy behind the particular marque. Originally, the philosophy was to outsell Louis Renault. That was soon replaced, though, with the main underlying philosophy that's always been there through production. That is to ally superior technology with a competitive price. And, of course, you've also got the design, the style of the Citroen to consider. The production line between 1919 and the Type A and a modern-day CX like this, CX25 Turbo, is a long one. It's 70 years. But that essential engineering and selling philosophy has always been there. Goodbye.